All right, welcome everyone to the July 28th, 2025 meeting of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. I'm Christopher Lozon, the chair. As Mass Law dictates, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, any member of the public is welcome to record this meeting as long as they make themselves known. Does any member of the public wish to make themselves known and that they're recording? I do not hear anyone, so Jim, do you mind taking the roll?
Sure, sure. Chris King,
Yes, here.
Chris Lazone,
Here.
Hector Gunther,
I'm here.
Jeremy Shea, Lillian Wu,
Here,
Tom King.
Present.
Okay. That's good. Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
so move.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
Okay. Jim, you mind calling the roll again?
Uh, Chris King,
Approved.
Chris Lazone,
Yes.
Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Jeremy Shea is not present, Lillian Wu,
Yes,
Tom King,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Okay. Now we get to the crux of the meeting. So several weeks ago, Councillor Lutke had reached out to Mark and then to myself about reviewing the fiscal impact analysis for the Wilkins 2 project in Barnstable Village, I believe technically, in Independence Park. They've submitted their own analysis. They're moving forward in the permitting. It's before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Councilor Lutke wanted us to review their numbers and come up with our own analysis, just kind of cross-check some things. And council leadership directed us to do so. So now we're going to have a discussion about it. And I asked Mark to schedule meetings for next Monday and the following Monday so we can actually draft some kind of report to present to the council. So I know we all have the same information on it at this point, so I'll open it up to discussion, I guess. One
So
thing
I,
that jumped out to me right away in their numbers was a vehicle excise tax. So their assumption is that all of the vehicles on the property are going to be newly registered in Barnstable based on the numbers. So that kind of conflicts with the objective of housing for people who already live in Barnstable. So I'm not, I'd be curious to see what the numbers are at the first phase, I guess, to see how accurate that is if they're newly registered vehicles and that's new revenue, or it's just being shifted from a different address in Barnstable, you know?
but Chris, my thought would be that if in fact it's people who already live in Barnstable and they leave the place where they are right now and go to this new development, then some other new resident would also come in to replace them. So you would have the excise taxes there.
Potentially, or if they're living, in somebody's home, just in an extra bedroom or something, there's various scenarios, but I'd be curious to know, I guess, in the first phase,
Yeah.
exactly how many people were already Barnstable residents, now that that's 95% occupied, if they have that data even. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenue. That just jumped out to me that they're assuming it's all new revenue for excise tax.
Mhm. Mark Milner, have you reviewed it? Has finance reviewed it, the finance department?
I had the same question as Chris was just raising. The assumption that it'll all be new tax revenue. It may be overly optimistic, but that's, I mean, that assumption could be modified to reflect a lower motor vehicle excise tax revenue. I don't know how you would go about trying to determine whether or not it's a new vehicle excise tax bill or not. That would be a very lengthy analysis that would need to be conducted to, um, you know, quantify all people living there, where they lived previously, what did they have a vehicle when they were living there versus, a vehicle now, and so forth. So I think it's just an overly aggressive assumption, but if it could be modified in a logical way, I think that would make sense. But even if they were to modify that, it's the bottom line is it still has a positive fiscal impact from a revenue standpoint.
I have some general comments about it. I reviewed Wilkins 1 and Wilkins 2, and both are very, very thoroughly discussed. I think that the developer did due diligence. They talked about the number of units and their estimate of the value of the assessments. Um, Wilkins 1, which was 2021, and finally came on, I guess, on board in 2025. Their estimates were ended up being a little low, based on what they thought the value was and on the taxes. So I think that basically the key question is the number of units, the permitting, and what the estimates of the assessed value will be. I think the excise tax on on vehicles is a really rough estimate, and quite frankly, I don't think it has much. I don't think we really need to worry about it a lot, is what I'm saying. The Wilkins 2 has 320 units. They estimate that it's going to be about $72 million. They estimate the taxes will be roughly $800,000. Well, based on the Wilkins 1 estimates, which were low, we don't know what will happen to the cost of construction, um, and what the ultimate assessment will be. So I think that's really the big part of our analysis.
So you said that it was low. The estimate was
Yeah,
done pre-pandemic, and the pandemic did skew everything up
right,
afterwards, correct?
right.
So
Yeah,
so their estimates were pre-pandemic, and the estimates that they have now post-pandemic that take that into an account. That's all. That was my thought.
but again, we don't know whether the inflation rate is going to stay the same or whether the interest rate is going to stay the same. So let's say it takes us a couple of years to construct all of that. Again, it's an unknown, is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Mark, Mark, do we know what the property tax revenues on Wilkins 1 amounted to in fiscal 2025? Is that a
Yeah,
number that we can get?
it was $439,317 in town taxes, $13,180 in CPA excise tax, and $145,595 in Barnstable Fire District tax, for a grand total of $598,092.
And there's so many numbers here, but how does that compare with what they forecast in the Wilkins 1 analysis?
They had originally estimated 498, so it's about $100,000 more.
498. So I'm on page 20 of the 23-page Wilkins 1 analysis. And that shows not the number you gave, Lillian, but $670,515 gross revenue, property taxes, excise taxes, and CPA. Versus Mark, you said it was five something?
It's 598, 092.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you'll scroll down, I got that 498 from that report of Wilkins 1.
right.
It's in there.
But Lillian, if you look at table 16, page 20, that shows their estimated annual gross revenue, property taxes, etc.
Well,
I
they
don't,
had
I don't,
estimated, excuse
I
me.
don't know where that 498 comes from.
Well, it's in that report.
On page
Okay.
9.
Yeah, page 9 will list all the total of the 670,000 hectare. It's
Yeah.
498 property taxes, 157,000 in excise taxes, and then about $15,000 in CPA surcharges.
Okay. So the actual number, their estimate is a little off, is a little more generous. Their revenue estimate is more generous than the actual.
No, the actual revenue is higher than what they estimated. But again, this estimate is several years old compared to a
Right.
2020 tax bill.
Okay.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I think on the revenue side, I mean, Lil, and you make a lot of good points. I think we have to accept some estimate of revenue, and I don't, I agree with Lillian's comments that the consultant did a lot of diligence. So I think it's we can take as a given their revenue estimate, total revenue estimate for the new project. I think the real issue is the cost side of the equation. And I mean, I'm sure folks have a lot of questions. I would take the police department costs. It looked like they focused on a new police officer, and I think they estimated that including benefits for a new officer, $130,000. I question whether that's the number to use or whether we should look at the police department operating budget, the approved number for personnel, which of course doesn't include benefits, $17.5 million. That's from page 21 of CFAC's operating budget report. Benefits, Mark, if we knew how many, do we know how many personnel, how many FTEs work in the police department currently?
It's approximately between civilian and sworn personnel, it's about 148 positions.
Okay, so 17.5, 148.
Correct.
So that comes out to $118,000 before benefits. And then what would you estimate the average benefit costs for each of those 148 people? I mean, I think that's the analysis we have to do rather than look at the average cost for a new police officer. And then I would ask whether to fully load the costs of the police department, we have to add in operating expenses and capital outlay, which are a couple $1 million more than the 17 and a half. Anyway, that's the analysis I would do for the police department to get to what is what's the bottom line number, and then we can do the estimate for each call if people think that that's a way to go. But I think my view is the analysis has to really break down each of the each of each of the town departments that will provide services to this new development. So I think I'll stop there. I don't know if other people have other thoughts.
I guess our task is to figure out what the revenue is. Do we want to deal with the overall revenue and just leave the expenses? Because all of the expenses are just merely estimates. And so we really can't get a handle on it in a concrete kind of way. We can guess how many policemen would you need, how much overhead is there. But I think if we look at the big picture, um, we'll get a better idea of what the revenue is for the town. Because the
Well, I think on the cost side of things, in my mind, we should be looking again at phase one and what have the actual impacts been of that already existing development, on the police, on the fire, what have the costs been in the first year or so that that's been open, um, to get kind of a baseline on what the impact has been on fire, on police. In my mind, that's where you determine what the actual cost is for those
Yeah,
services.
I agree with you. I think those would be the hard actual numbers. It came online in 25. So I guess we would need to figure out with however many people are living in Wilkins one, what the cost of police and protection was, because we don't
So
have that number.
And not to confuse things more, but they talked about two different strategies in monitoring or measuring the costs: the average cost model and then the marginal cost model or marginal cost approach. And they had stated that for Wilkins 2, they want to focus in on the marginal cost approach as being the approach to derive the cost. And to go back to Chris's comment is what was done for Wilkins 1? Was it the average cost or the marginal cost? And
If I may, Chris,
yeah,
it's a good point. They used the marginal cost approach on the first
okay,
analysis as well. And so,
okay,
I mean, to Chris's point, yeah, they estimate what the number of calls of service would be from a public safety perspective. And I guess the question is, well, how accurate is it? Is it around that? Has it been around that for the first phase of the project, or is it significantly more or less? And if it's significantly different, then maybe you want to get a better understanding as to what the cost impact would be. But if it's about what they projected, I can tell you right now, we did not add an additional police officer to our force just because of this one, development. And we will likely will not add another police officer for this second development. But there comes a point in time where the calls of service in the police department reach where you have to add an officer, but it's not attributable to just any one facility being developed.
Right. I think that, I mean, we should be able to get data on how many calls were made for that address, though, correct?
We could inquire the police department. They keep those sort of records. Yes.
Yeah, and the fire department as well, to see what the actual impact has been. And that's a great point, Mark, I think, is if their estimate is somewhat close to what the actual amount of calls is and what the impact is, then their new estimate is reasonable if the old estimate was somewhat accurate. But if there is an outlier somewhere, then it needs to be adjusted. So I think that's all that Betty was wanting us to do and the town council wants us to do is look at these numbers. Are they reasonable based on the first phase, or does something need to be adjusted in how they're coming up with these projections? Um,
yeah,
so
Chris, just a
Chris,
quick question, and that is the email you sent out said that we were to look at the tax benefits and not the tax costs. Is that not correct?
That may be how I worded it. Yeah. I mean, the benefit, though, if there's excessive cost, then the benefit is less,
So
obviously. So,
are they looking for how much tax revenue, or are they looking for the net cost to the town, tax revenue minus expenses?
I would have to look at Betty's request again to see exactly what she asked, but it would be I think, the net benefit, based on what the income is from the taxes and then whatever the costs are. So it should be the net impact
Well,
that
I
we're
sort of
looking at.
agree with Mark then, which is at that point I mean, all you're looking at is estimates. How many kids are there going to be in the school system? I mean, it's a complete guess, right?
Right,
Uh,
which again, that's why I think we should look at the first phase and, how many kids are living in that complex? How many calls have been made to the police? How many calls have been made to the fire? That's how you get what the impact has been, the real impact. Not to say that the second project's going to be exactly the same,
yeah,
but
yeah.
if that's somewhat similar to what their projections were, then their projections for the second project would be reasonable as well.
As a
No,
non-member, am I allowed to speak?
I think that the projected costs of fire and education and police at this point is hypothetical. We have no way of
Hmm.
knowing this. And so I'm not sure that we can be very helpful in determining what the net is going to be in terms of revenue. We can only look at the big picture based on the submission for Wilkins 2.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
But
mean, you're right, Lillian, because one bad actor moves into Wilkins 2, but there wasn't a bad actor in Wilkins 1. Everything can be different, we don't know.
Right. I mean, you can't
The
say anything
lessons,
definitively.
do the lessons learned in the Scudder Ave information, can that be carried forward to one and two or to two? Those analysis, I mean, there was a good analysis there and a small net benefit in the Scudder Ave addendum that was sent.
I guess the basic question is who and how are these submissions reviewed to start out with? We're getting this one secondhand. Who normally does this? And what kind of questions does do these people who review it normally ask?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I jumped in late. It's Betty Ludke here, and I'm the one who asked you guys to look at this. As far as I understand, this is not done for the projects that don't go through the Cape Cod Commission. This one went through the Cape Cod Commission, as did the first Wilkins, as did 35 Scudder. For example, the large complex at Cascade, that was a by right development. Well, I guess this is by right too, but because that was in the GIZ, I don't think it had to go through Cape Cod Commission, so I don't think any study was done. I just I'd ask for you guys to look at this just to see, and it is all the discussion. Again, I'm coming in late, but it is all assumptions. And when Chris came to our meeting the other day, I kind of likened it to levers. If they put less 3 bedrooms, they're probably going to get nicer people. I mean, maybe that's not a blanket statement, but less families and that kind of thing, and less people in schools, and that. I mean, you can manipulate the data. I just it's one of their selling points. And until I brought it up, they were saying they're just going to get, what the town's going to get a straight 800,000. Well, you're not, because there are costs associated with the services when you get to this scale of facility. So I just wanted you guys, because you have, more expertise in this area, to look at the assumptions, see if they make sense, and see, what might happen if we did more 3 bedrooms, if we tried to get more families in there. It's really tough. Are we building the apartments we need, or are they rebuilding the apartments the developers need to keep their costs where they want to be? It's a real conundrum. As I say, with so many apartments coming online and very few having to even do this type, and to Lillian's question, it's part of the submission to the Cape Cod Commission. Maybe Mark Milne can say more, but I've never seen it in the context of any others. I don't even know if the Affordable Housing um, Committee has to look at this kind of analysis. I don't think they do when you do the execution of those, giving them some of the affordable housing money.
Well, thank you, Betty, for weighing in. So, I mean, you're looking more just for us to say, not necessarily like an item by item analysis, but does their analysis make sense? Do their assumptions make sense? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But because their numbers seem so much higher. I mean, a town's benefiting a lot more than it was with 35 Scudder. And maybe that's because 35 Scudder was going to have a lot more three bedrooms, maybe a lot more two bedrooms, and cater more to families. And even 35 Scudder, after it was pointed out that, gosh, I think their first analysis, they said the town would get about $30,000 somewhere, 30 and change. And then they changed it a little bit to say, well, I guess there won't be that many school children in there. So again, you can kind of make it say whatever you want. So I just wanted you guys to look at it and see if you thought the assumptions were valid, and you know the exact mix, and if you can discern from their information, from their data, what would happen if you change the mix of apartments, because this is going through the zoning board of appeals for a special permit, which means the zoning board could ask for a few things. So that's why I just wanted some, it's not purely by right, this Wilkins 2. And that's why I wanted to take a closer look at it.
Okay. So, I mean, again, in my mind, that goes back to we need to compare what's going on at Wilkins 1 with what's actually happening there. How many students live at that site now in the school system? How many calls have been made to the fire? How many calls have been made to police? To see what the actual impact and the benefit is. If their assumptions were right on school children living in Wilkins 1, and their assumptions probably will be right for Wilkins too. But if they're way out of whack, then something's wrong there.
Yeah,
I
the
mean, I don't
only
know if you guys agree or not.
if I can jump in, Chris, the only caveat with that is if the students living in Wilkins 1 that are attending Barnstable Public Schools, you would have to take a deep dive into whether or not were they in the Barnstable Public School system prior to moving to Wilkins 1.
Right. Yeah, I mean that I
50%
think
of them
that's
could already have been in the
relevant
school
too.
system.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
That's
so that would take some work to get that information from every resident that's living there and the school department to figure it out. All the kids that attend Barnstable Public Schools living in that area, can you go back to see if they were in your system prior to moving?
right. Is that something that the school department could tell us? Not saying who the students are, obviously, but what students live at that address and were they previously students?
I would have to place that inquiry with them to see if that's something they could do.
Okay. Because
I,
again, I
I,
mean, it kind of goes
but
back to my point on the excise tax too. Like if that's already revenue that we're getting in Barnstable, it's
Exactly.
not fair to estimate that as new tax revenue.
But Chris, we could do this easier. You could go look at the total number of students in the Barnstable schools and
But
see if that changed with the opening of Wilkins 1. And it's my recollection is that the number of students has been relatively flat.
well, right, there's been no meaningful change in the
Right.
student body population.
So with the
Right.
opening of Wilkins 1, the burden on the schools appears not to have changed.
Correct.
So that's an easy way to figure out that answer.
Well, overall, it hasn't changed for the whole town. It just, I'm
Exactly.
curious. Right. No,
Right.
which I,
So
I
my point
understand
is
your point.
you add in
Right.
all this new housing, and it appears that the burden on the taxpayers in terms of students didn't really meaningfully increase.
Frank, did you want to make some comments?
Well, several, if I could. Relative to school, populations have been going down. Costs have continued to go up. So if you do a trend analysis of the schools, the population has gone down over 10 years, but the costs continue to rise. But my thought overall, though, is you could look at this far more strategically. You know, you're looking at the effects on the first year. It'd be better to compare it to something that's 10 years old. It's like saying, I bought a new car. What will my maintenance be in the first year? It won't be much, but in year 10, it'll be significant. Like the cost of a fireman over a 60-year life of this, you will have three firemen. That third fireman will be watching that building, if you will, but the other two will be in their pension mode. And that's not in the cost analysis at all, but it is and it will be in the town budget. I don't know if my math is clear, but I think Mark would say it. Over the life of this, let's say it's 60 years or 80 years, the average fireman works 20 or 30 years and then is on retirement for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. So that cost 10 years out comes into the budget of the town. It's not in this analysis at all, and it probably should and could be. And the benefit you'll see at that point is goes away for the most part.
That would only apply if the particular project required us to bring on additional staffing. And there's no indication yet that the police department or the fire department are saying, at least the police department, I don't know about the fire, but the police department has not indicated that they need another police officer just because of development of this property, either phase one or phase two.
You go even more strategic and say, could the fire department that services this new building, if two buildings are on fire, do they have a ladder truck that can get to the roof of two buildings at once, or are they going to need new ladder trucks? Much bigger picture than what's being debated at the moment. Or given the traffic patterns, they're only going to have one road going into this. They're going to have 700 cars coming out in the morning. If there's a fire and there's one access road and 700 cars are trying to vacate and fire and rescue is trying to go in, there's a problem. So the next time around, the town will be asked by the residents to put in another road. The builder will be gone at that point. It'll be the taxpayers' cost to put in that second road. Just things to consider.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hypothetical situations, obviously, and kind of unquantifiable costs. Um, and your point is fair about looking at, a longer picture of similar projects that have been in place maybe for 15 or 20 years. What are the costs associated with those in different communities?
In Barnstable, are there any that have a positive impact? Or are they heavily requiring police? I think of Cromwell Court, where I've visited families, or the one by the KFC. Those have an age. That's what this is going to be in 10 years. Right now, everything's hunky-dory, everything's brand new. There's no one playing in the parking lot, if you know what I mean. There are no issues. I think it's far better to compare it to something that's 10 or 15 or 20 years old, because that's what this will be at some point.
Well, I think you make some valid points here, but we've really been asked to look at this particular plan and its submission. And the question was, are there assumptions basically make sense? And as Mark pointed out, so far we haven't had to have additional police added because of this particular development. So I would suggest that we look at the big picture, because the added expenses are all hypothetical, and we don't have any hard data to extrapolate the assessments made, the assumptions made in Wilkins too. So I suggest that we just look at the big picture. They have done a very good job of being comprehensive and dealing with all of the various aspects of it. As I pointed out earlier, Wilkins 1 and Wilkins 2 were very well put together. They did their due diligence, and I don't see any problem with it.
I think I'm really in agreement with Lillian on this one.
So Lillian, a question is from Chris here is if we look at the big picture, what are the metrics that would be important from a big picture standpoint to focus in on? Would it be the mix of the apartments? Would it be uh, I'm just throwing things out just to put uh, a fence around it as to what the big picture is. Because I agree to look at the big picture. I just don't know what that is.
Well, we can look at the big picture. They have to have 10% affordable, but we were asked to look at the financing and the potential revenue.
Hmm.
I mean, we weren't asked to weigh in on affordable housing. We weren't weigh to whether there was enough roads or any of that. We were asked to look at the revenue.
Yeah, I
And
would agree with you on, it's not in our purview to look at, the development in terms of how many road accesses or anything like that. It's strictly the financial part of it. Um, I don't know, does it make sense for us to talk to the police department and the fire department if we can get them in here to the next meeting? I don't know if I mean, did you talk with the developer at all, the attorney, Mark? Are they able to come in for the next meeting?
Yes, I did speak to their attorney who indicated they could. We do have, actually, there are a couple of folks here from New England Development at the meeting tonight, but we didn't extend an invitation because we weren't planning on having any questions for them, but they're certainly invited to hear the conversation. But
Hmm.
I'm certain they can make themselves available at next Monday's meeting if you want to have them in.
Okay. You guys feel it would be helpful to ask questions of New England Development in some kind of official capacity at the next meeting?
Makes sense to me.
Sure.
Okay.
Can we write
Yeah.
questions beforehand, Chris?
Say that again.
Get those to you or to Mark or through Mark?
You can. Yeah, I would say through Mark, submit them. Any specific questions you have. Yep.
Okay.
And if you could all submit your questions to me soon, in the next couple of days, I can forward them to their attorney who can then share them with New England Development.
that would be great. This is an opportunity for us to get some of that baseline data from Wilkins 1 that we've been talking about.
Right. I mean, I think the basic set of questions are to what extent did your estimates for Wilkins 1 get matched by the reality?
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Anyone have any additional comments or questions or
I,
thoughts?
I would
Yeah.
say any change in the design of Wilkins 2 based on the results that you saw with Wilkins 1.
Do you mean architectural changes? Do you mean
I think maybe not architectural changes, Tom, but the mix of apartments based on the uh, uh, the type of apartments that were, the demand for apartments that are one bedroom, two bedroom, or three bedroom, and were there changes in the quantity or the mix because of what they saw with what was seen with Wilkins 1.
Yeah, I think what Chris just said, it would be very informative for the town, is the mix of apartments. Absolutely. In terms of what, their experience, if they're changing it up at all. on who we're getting in there. And I don't have the numbers, but you hear the anecdotal, all these families leaving Cape Cod. Well, family's going to need more than a one bedroom. And when you get into the three bedrooms, you start getting pretty expensive. And I love what Frank said. I thought Frank brought up some really good ideas with the longer vision. He brought up Cromwell Court, and it's hard to compare this. This is a 13% affordable, 10% at 65% AMI, and then the other three at 85% AMI. Cromwell Court is an entirely affordable, as is Village Green. So it's hard to compare. The only thing we really have is Wilkins One. You have Everly, that's also a 10% affordable, but it's 55 and older, so it's a different demographic. These apartments are really hitting our sweet spot where we say we have our problem is housing our residents. And that's why, I really want to look at this carefully. So thank you for taking this up. And I think it would be wise maybe to talk to the police. But again, I think as Frank said, this is squeaky new. And it came up at the Zoning Board of Appeals. In fact, Chairman Dewey was asking this, how do you screen the people coming in here in terms of credit ratings and things? It gets very complicated. You can screen out the undesirables. Okay. But, we might have a lot of folks that are going to get screened out that don't have those credit ratings. I mean, to me, it's a fascinating study. And I know you can't go into the depth, but, anything you can do, I think asking the questions, how does it compare? What did you learn from Wilkins One would be helpful.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it. What did they learn from Wilkins 1? They submitted Wilkins 2 a year ago. And have they learned anything from Wilkins 1 to alter their plans for Wilkins 2? I think that's the key.
And I'd highly recommend, someone brought up earlier, Hector did, if you can do a lot of fast forwarding, but that July 28th ZBA meeting really gives you both sides of the perspective, from what the developers, their positions are and what their thoughts are, and as well as the citizenry of the town. So both sides were covered, and I would highly recommend, if you haven't, to take a look at that ZBA meeting.
So, Councilwoman Lucky, you bring up some really interesting points about individuals applying to become a resident of an apartment. New England Development is a developer. They're developing the apartments. From what I understand, Hanover Company is going to run. They're the company that would run the apartments after they're developed. They would manage the apartments. What I didn't understand is, do they have a contract, and is it with whom? Is it with the city of Barnstable, or is it with a developer? How long is that contract? Just a bunch of questions in my head about running these apartments moving forward.
Yeah, and nothing with Barnstable unless Mark Mellon. The normal MO for these type of operations is they get them rented up and they sell them. Everly has already changed hands.
Yeah.
There's one up at the Kingston, the old mall in Kingston, Mass. That one's already changed hands. I mean, that's the model. Although I understand from these guys, and that's when you have the discussion, that their model is to keep them. That they don't do this. They don't lease up and sell. But that remains to be seen.
Just some thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anyone?
Well, these projects have so many moving parts. I think CFAC needs to remember that our job is really just to look at the finances of it. We're not worried about the credit ratings of individuals. We're not worried about who's going to run the the day-to-day of the apartment complex. We just really, even though we are concerned, our job, our responsibility, or our the request was for us to look at the revenue. I just want us to remember that.
So I'd like to just pose another question for the group. So if you look at page 24 of the Wilkins analysis, table 12, I understood from Betty's request to Chris that what what the council wanted us to assess is what the net positive fiscal impact is going to be from this project. Betty, is that correct? And they go on, and on page 25, it says the consultant's report concludes there will be a net positive fiscal impact of 520,000 if you subtract the costs of the police, other departments, and schools uh, from from the revenue, the property taxes and revenue. I guess I'm just posing the question. For example, on the police department, they they come up with this. They assume it's one half of a new officer of $65,000, and that's going to be the cost, the net new cost from this project on the police department. I would have thought that they would have done an analysis where they project the number of calls that the police department would have to respond to and quantify the costs of those calls rather than just using this round number 65,000, one half of a new officer. And that's my thought. You know, I agree that revenue is important, but if we're going to give the town council what they asked for, which is an assessment of the net positive fiscal impact for the town of this project, I think we have to make sure we have the cost side of the equation nailed down. And I for one am not satisfied that to just pick one half of a new police officer. I'd rather project the number of calls that they expect to the police to have to respond to, and then what is the cost of each call. So that's my thought.
I agree with you 100% on that, Hector, and that's why I thought it would be relevant to get data on what's already occurred at the existing development for calls, and to kind of quantify that cost in some way and
Right,
project out what the expected annual impact will be,
right,
how many calls, what the average
right,
cost is per call. I think that's very important.
right.
Um,
But it's one thing to Chris to look at what happens to Wilkins one in terms of number of calls. The question that I think CFAC has to address if we're going to respond to the town council's request is to quantify the cost per call by the police
right.
department. And that in turn gets to what is the, what is, what are the component costs, the salaries, benefits, how many calls they make per year, the police department, and then come up with an average cost per call. And that's the way I would do the analysis. Mark, you said there are 148 FTEs in the police department, and the personnel costs are whatever they were. I'd have to go back and find it, but and then we could add in benefits, and then get a total cost for personnel for the police department for fiscal 2026, and then divide it by the number of calls the police department makes in a given year. And that would give us the cost per call. And I would assume that each call at this new development would uh, be approximately the average cost of a call. So that's my thought, that we do have to come up with
Yeah, I understand where you're trying to go with this, Hector, and it makes sense. Just keep in mind that all the activity within the Barnstable Police Department isn't all responding to calls. I
Right,
mean, there's a big portion of the activity in the department is responding to calls, but there's a lot of other activity within the department, proactive stuff, preventative stuff that's done as
right,
opposed to responding to calls. So how are you
right,
going to isolate each one of those types of costs within the BPD before you're figuring out, well, out of their $17 million budget,
right.
two-thirds of it's responding to calls. The other one-third is doing all this administrative stuff,
Hmm.
training,
Right,
proactive community policing. You're really getting into the weeds if you're looking at it from that perspective, and that's going to take some time. Just something to consider.
right, right. Well, perhaps the police department could give us an indication of, what they think their costs are in aggregate of responding to calls in a given year and go at it that way. I mean, you're making some great points, Mark, but I for one, am not satisfied with this round number of $65,000 for, one half of a police officer, but that's my two
Yeah.
cents.
Yeah. I mean, to Mark's point, it is difficult to quantify that, but I think starting just with the number of calls total for the whole town that the police
Right,
respond to, then the number of calls for Wilkins 1 that have already been experienced,
right,
extrapolate that that can be expected to be the number of calls for Wilkins 2 in its first year, and then try to assign some kind of value to that. Um, Again, if we can ask the chief of police maybe to estimate that in some way, just so we have some kind of number.
yeah,
And same thing with the fire department.
right, exactly right.
So just, Mark, I actually thought I had heard you say that with Wilkins 1, the police department did not hire an additional officer. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was no direct correlation between the development of that property and us bringing on an additional police officer.
So it sounds to me like it's simply as reasonable, Hector, that there might be no new cop at all.
Yeah,
I think that's kind
yeah,
of the point, though, like to
yeah,
assign a value impact of just half of a full-time equivalent officer. That's not really a legitimate estimate.
Correct. I
You know,
agree with that one.
it's
On a
just kind of an
marginal basis,
arbitrary number that they put in there.
there will never be the need for an additional head in anything. Marginal cost analysis is why they choose it, because it will never result in any additional needs in any department. Unless you look at it at a much longer time frame.
Yeah, so I think that's the point Hector's making there. Estimate cost estimate for the police of half of an additional officer doesn't really make sense. I mean, it doesn't seem to really be based in any kind of actual analysis or actual number. It's just an arbitrary amount. So, again, in my mind, we need to find out how many calls there are for the town, how many there were for Wilkins 1, assign some kind of value per call, and extrapolate that for the new project. So I don't know if we
yeah.
can submit questions to the chief of police and just try to get some kind of response before the next meeting.
I don't, I
Yeah,
don't, I don't think so. I think if we don't need another half of a police, as Mark pointed out, then we can back that out, and then the net revenue becomes bigger by that $65,000.
Well, there is some kind of impact, even if they don't have to hire an additional officer. If they're responding to calls at this complex, then that is an impact
And that's
financially.
what, that's correct, and that's what we're going to find out from them with their experience in Wilkins One. Exactly how many were there?
Well, I mean, I
so
don't know if they even have that data, how many calls were to Wilkins
That's
1. I think the
yeah.
police would have to provide us with that.
So if you look at page 17 of the consultant's analysis, there's table 7, projected emergency service calls. They don't have data for Wilkins 1, but they have data for other projects, Village Green, Harbor House, etc. And they have it for police calls and then fire and EMS calls. So that got my attention. I said, okay, well, what are the costs of each of those calls? And Mark, you raised a great point that not everything in the personnel department is devoted to calls. So maybe the police chief could give us an estimate for what percentage of their budget is expended on calls. At any rate, I'm not going to beat the dead horse here, but that's my thinking that we do have to do a little bit more analysis on the cost side here.
And let me just add one thing, and Jim Sproul mentioned it. I don't know how many of you have gone to that ZBA meeting and listened to it, but it was fascinating. And during the meeting, Cynthia Cole spoke, and she had said what seems to be, an accepted fact, if you will, is that residential properties are not your tax money. The apartments are not your tax revenue chief sources. I mean, in our case, it's our single family homes that are generating that. But the developer spoke and he said, oh, no, no, going forward, that whole paradigm has shifted. And this is going to be your number one moneymaker. He said that during the meeting. And again, I just bring it back again for an overarching look, which, Lillian has pointed out, what is the revenue? Because we have hundreds and hundreds of these mostly market rate apartments coming online. And I think this will be very helpful to, have you give us any kind of analysis you can to see, where we're headed for our revenue. You know, is this a truism? Was that guy correct when he said that at that ZBA meeting?
Mm.
Hmm.
Well, that's a valid point. I think that Wilkins One's property tax is taxed as in a residential rather than commercial.
Correct.
And I'll point out
That is correct. Yes.
they pay the higher tax rate as well because obviously it's not eligible for the residential exemption.
Mhm.
Chris, did
All
you
right.
want to invite the police chiefs to the next meeting? And are you assembling a list of specific questions for the police and fire chief?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to speak to them or at least submit questions to them if they can give us a response to that. I mean, I don't, we're on a very limited time frame here, obviously. Um, we have the next meeting and then we really have to have something drafted and approved at the following meeting to present to the town council. So I don't know if we're going to have the developers at the next meeting. I mean, I guess if the chiefs can both come in and we can speak to them just briefly, that's fine. I don't know. What does everyone else think? Do you think have them in, or just you want to submit questions if you have them and get a response that we can discuss at the next meeting? What
My
what are
thought
everyone's
would
thoughts?
my thought would be to submit some questions to the chief and then ask her to, participate at the front end of the meeting next Monday if she's available.
I would agree. I think we want questions in advance, but I will have follow-ups. If
Right.
they can show up, that would be great. They may not be able to, but if they could, that would be great.
I agree.
Okay.
Does anyone know the methodology they use to budget heads for fire or police?
Uh, Maybe the police chiefs would know. Yeah.
I have a question. Are we sending our report to the town council and to the ZBA?
That is a good question.
I think it
It was,
goes, our audience has got to be the town council in the
yeah,
first
it was
instance.
requested by the council, yeah. So,
But we need to presume that ZBA will receive a copy.
The chair of the ZBA, Chair Dewey, had asked about it. It came up again at that meeting. He had asked about that. So I think there's an interest there.
Okay. All right. So
Betty, does town council have any kind of authority over whether this is approved, or is this purely a ZBA special permit vote up or down?
This is a ZBA special permit, which means they could impose some conditions on it. And so that's why it's been continued, because there's been so much interest in this. And the first Wilkins was more by right, without any kind of ZBA special permit talk, but this one is. So that's why there's a lot more interest. And again, if you listen to it, you can really see that the ZBA is very interested in getting a lot more details on this.
And is ZBA interested in this net benefit to the town number?
Yes, I believe they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
they really, you can listen to the meeting. They absolutely are. It's a huge. It's huge. They say this is the leading edge of just a storm of apartment buildings, market rate coming online.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, for my part, I'm happy to write out several questions I have. Chris, who should I send them to? Mark, you, both of
yeah,
you?
let's go through Mark on that.
Okay.
You certainly can send them to me as well, but I would
Okay.
say questions for the developer, the chief of police, and the
Okay.
fire chief,
Okay.
and we'll try to
Maybe
get
I'll just
all of
address
them.
them. I'll address them to Mark and then copy everyone else on the committee.
Yeah,
How
yeah, that
about
would be
that?
great.
Yeah.
Mark, when would you like to have them by?
Well, if you can get them to me by the end of the day tomorrow, that'll just give them, more time to prepare responses for you.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do it.
And
Okay.
I
I
mean,
have to
yeah,
sign off. I have grandchildren running around the house, so um, I'll send my questions. Thanks, everybody.
thanks, Hector. Have a
Thanks,
good night.
Hector.
Okay, so I guess that's it for the moment then. We'll come up with our questions and discuss it more next week and try to draft some kind of report that we can review for the following meeting. Unless anyone has any other comments, we'll move on.
It's a good plan.
All right. So next agenda item, any correspondence from committee members?
No.
No. Communication from staff at all? I think we have several counselors here. Mark, if you have anything to communicate.
Yeah, just a reminder to the committee members, if you are planning on preparing another summary budget document this year, we should probably begin that discussion at your next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be that first meeting in September. So that or that last meeting, that meeting in August, your normally scheduled meeting in August, so we can get that project underway, because you typically issue that in the fall sometime.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should do that for sure. So we'll plan on that at the end of August meeting to get started.
Is that a review of the capital as well as the operational, or just one of them?
It includes both. I can provide the committee, the copies of what you've prepared over the last few years to give you a sense of its content. It's usually about 12 pages long and includes some review of the operating budget, capital program, CWMP.
And they're online. I could look
They're
those up
online.
online. Okay.
Yep. They're under the CPAC area of the website.
Okay, I'll go online.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question, I guess, if we're in that part of the agenda, because I was here when Mark presented that beautiful tool on the comprehensive wastewater management plan. When will that be presented to the town council? Because I was so intrigued with Lillian's idea about that whiff. I really think that's something that we would like to, well, I can say I think the town council should mull over sooner than later. Everyone keeps talking about the override. I know Councilor Mendez is always talking about the override. And I don't know if the override would have to be done, based on your model. And I think it would be, again, I don't know, September-ish, October-ish. We're going to be starting our strategic plan. And certainly a strategic plan needs a good understanding of economics or finance to be viable. You can't just plan without constraints with that. So I don't know if that's a question, Chris, for you and Mark. Is that model going to be presented with some maybe recommendations or ideas? And because we always look at the tax abatement, the residential exemption, what is it, December timeframe? We've got the CPA going. When would we introduce the WIF idea? Is there a timing that the WIF would be done, Mark? Is that also in the December timeframe if we wanted to pull the trigger on that? So that's my comment. How do we
It's
look at that?
that would certainly be up to the town council as to when they would want to, if and when they would want to, put a ballot question out there to adopt a WIF or a water investment infrastructure fund, which is a 3% surcharge like the Community Preservation Act surcharge on everyone's real estate tax bill. It's like an override in that it has to go to a ballot. It's an increase in taxes. Once adopted, I think you have to have it in place for a minimum of 3 years before you could actually revoke it. But yeah, we had planned on making that tool, forecasting the comprehensive wastewater management plan, the financial tool we developed to the town council when we had the fiscal policy discussion. And that has not been scheduled officially yet. So, but that's our plan. We want to present it to the council when we have that discussion. And of course, that discussion is going to include all these different ideas, including the possibility of a whiff. and so, yeah, I mean, and the council would have to determine when and if they wanted to do a whiff, and if so, what year would you want to make it effective? The earliest you could make it effective at this point in time would be fiscal year 27. And of course, that would require a ballot question to be, done before June 30th, 2026.
Right. So we'd want to, start working it in the late fall, early winter, if we wanted to do that.
That's correct.
Okay, good. So you already have a plan of when you might present that, because I thought that tool, it's magnificent. So
Yeah,
thank you.
We're just waiting for, that invitation to have the fiscal policy discussion, which will include more than just the funding of the CWMP, but other factors as well.
Oh, who's giving you the invitation? You said you're waiting for an invitation from whom?
The council.
Oh,
Town
okay.
council. Yeah.
So you're ready to give this presentation whenever it's good to go?
Ready. When I'm told that I'm requested to be before you, I will be before you and ready to go.
Because our first meeting for our strategic plan is on September 11th. And from what I understand, I don't know if Mark, if you've been interviewed, the Collins Center was going to talk to the staff to prepare for that, or?
Yeah, I haven't been interviewed yet. No. So
you haven't been. Okay, but just
but
so
I do understand that the plan is to interview all department heads
okay.
as part of your strategic plan review. The Collins Center is going to contact every department head, but I haven't been notified when that's going to be yet.
Okay, and so just for all of you guys, September 11th is our first meeting for the strategic plan. It's being led by the Collins Center, and I have enormous respect for the Collins Center, so I'm so glad they're doing it. The plan has been designed intentionally to go through the elections. So if some council members change out, then we get new ones in there, and so I think it's a good plan because it keeps a continuum versus an us versus them. Some may leave or everyone stays. We don't know. So that's that. And I think that your presentation should be right in that time frame. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? I saw Counselor Starr, but I guess he dropped off, so. Think we're good on that then, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Jim, can you call the roll?
Sure. Chris King,
Yes.
Chris Lazone,
Yes.
Hector Gunther, Jeremy Shea, Lillian Wu,
Yes.
Tom Keene,
Yes.
and Jim Sproul's a yes.
Excellent.